yellow school bus, usually a beacon of laughter and youthful energy, sat abandoned on the dusty roadside, its door ajar like a silent scream. It was a crisp autumn morning in 2007 when it happened. 14 bright-eyed children, on a seemingly ordinary field trip to the local nature reserve, vanished without a trace. No ransom note, no witnesses, just an eerie silence that swallowed the small town of Havenwood whole. Parents waited at the school gates, their smiles slowly morphing into masks of confusion, and then, gut-wrenching despair as ours bled into daze, and the bus remained the only grim clue. Your support allows us to bring you more gripping investigations and untold stories. Now let's delve deeper into the events leading up to that fateful school trip. It was the annual field trip to Whispering Pines Nature Reserve, a day every child looked forward to. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the air, a perfect backdrop for a day of exploration. As the time approached, Mrs. Davison began gathering her students, counting heads as they slowly made their way back. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire, a wave of disbelief and terror washing over Havenwood. Law enforcement, with their serious faces and grim determination, swarmed the nature reserve. They were joined by hundreds of volunteers from Havenwood and neighboring towns. Ordinary people with flashlights and a desperate hope in their eyes. They combed through every inch of the dense forest, shouting the children's names until their voices were hoarse. Helicopters hovered overhead, their spotlights cutting through the darkness, while search dogs sniffed tirelessly at the ground. Every bush, every stream, every hidden cave was explored, but the vastness of the woods seemed to mock their efforts. The air was thick with the chilling silence of absence, broken only by the crackle of walkie-talkies and the anxious murmurs of the search parties. The school principal, a man usually composed, barked orders into his phone, his face pale with shock.
Local authorities were mobilized with dizzying speed.
Police cars, sirens wailing, raced towards the nature reserve. The once peaceful woods were suddenly alive with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles and the urgent voices of first responders. Parents, hearing the news, rushed to the school, their hearts pounding with a terrifying mix of hope and despair. The town, just hours before bustling with daily life, was now gripped by a collective fear, united in a desperate search for answers that seemed to vanish with the children into thin air. As she reached the bus, a cold dread began to creep into her heart. Her count was off. She recounted, her voice trembling slightly, but the numbers didn't change. 14 children were missing. Panic, sharp and sudden, gripped her. She frantically called out their names, her voice growing hoarse, her eyes scanning the dense woods, but only silence answered. The parent volunteers joined her, their faces mirroring her growing terror. The yellow bus, which had brought them here with such hope, now stood as an ominous empty shell, its open door a silent testament to the unimaginable. Mrs. Davison, along with 2 parent volunteers, guided them along the main trail. They pointed out different types of leaves, identified bird calls, and talked about the delicate balance of nature. The children were full of energy, running ahead a little, then stopping to examine a unique rock or a colorful butterfly. It was a beautiful, ordinary day, filled with the simple joys of childhood and discovery. Each child was seen, their smiles bright, their voices clear as they asked questions and shared their observations. No one noticed anything out of the ordinary, no strange cars, no suspicious figures. Just the innocence of a school trip unfolding as planned. The schoolyard, usually filled with the routine sounds of morning bells and teachers' calls, was alive with the giddy chatter of 14 children. Their backpacks packed with snacks and their minds brimming with the wonders they expected to see. Mrs. Davison, their 5th grade teacher, watched them with a warm smile, her heart swelling with the familiar joy of sharing new experiences with her students. Little Lily skipped onto the bus, clutching her worn teddy bear, while Alex, ever the curious one, peered out the window, already imagining the wild animals they might spot. The bright yellow bus pulled away, a symbol of adventure, its departure leaving behind only the quiet hum of a town unaware of the nightmare about to unfold. Sarah, little Lily's mother, still remembers the way the crisp air suddenly felt heavy, suffocating her with each passing moment. The local elementary school was the heart of the community, a place where children learned, played, and forged lifelong friendships. The annual field trip to the Whispering Pines Nature Reserve was a much-anticipated event, a day for the kids to connect with nature and learn about the local flora and fauna. Mrs. Davison, a beloved fifth-grade teacher known for her kind smile and engaging lessons, had meticulously planned the outing. Parents waved goodbye as the bright yellow bus pulled away, never imagining it would be the last time they saw their children. The scent of freshly brewed coffee from the waiting room turned bitter, a stark contrast to the sweet smell of her daughter's strawberry-scented hair she had kissed goodbye that morning. The investigation stalled, theories ranging from a tragic accident to a calculated abduction leading nowhere. The national spotlight eventually dimmed, but for the families, the agony remained a constant gnawing ache. Birthdays came and went, empty chairs at dinner tables serving as painful reminders of the futures that were never allowed to unfold. Hope, once a flickering candle, threatened to extinguish completely under the weight of unanswered questions. Michael, whose son Alex dreamt of becoming an astronaut, paced relentlessly, his hopeful questions to the authorities turning into desperate pleas. The vibrant photographs of the missing children, plastered across every lamppost and news channel, came haunting reminders of the joy that had been so abruptly stolen. Years crawled by like wounded soldiers. Havenwood became a town draped in grief, its once lively streets now echoing with the whispers of what-ifs and maybes. Then, 18 years later, a discovery. Deep within the now overgrown nature reserve, a group of hikers stumbled upon something that sent shockwaves through the long-dormant case. Something that would unravel the mystery of that fateful day and forever change the lives of those left behind. The Earth held secrets, and after nearly 2 decades, it was finally ready to yield one of its most heartbreaking truths. What they found wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a simple answer. It was a complex puzzle piece that would force everyone to confront the unimaginable. Prepare to have your understanding of that day shattered, as the truth, buried for 18 long years, is finally unearthed. If you want to follow this incredible story and witness the shocking revelations that await, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. The year 2007 started like any other in Havenwood, a peaceful town nestled amidst rolling hills and lush forests. That morning, the air at Havenwood Elementary was practically buzzing with excitement. When they arrived at the Whispering Pines Nature Reserve, the children spilled out of the bus, their laughter echoing through the tall trees. The plan was to meet back at the bus by 3 p.m. The alarm was raised immediately. Mrs. Davison's frantic call to the school office shattered the calm of the afternoon. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows over Whispering Pines, a massive search operation swung into full gear. Days turned into a grueling week, then weeks into a tormenting month. Yet the search yielded nothing concrete. There was no dropped backpack, no torn piece of clothing, no clear footprint that could lead them anywhere. Some whispered of a tragic accident. Perhaps the children had wandered off the trail, fallen into a ravine, or gotten hopelessly lost in the unforgiving wilderness. Parents clung to each other, their tears never ending, their once vibrant homes now filled with an unbearable silence. FBI agents, with their sharp suits and determined expressions, arrived in Havenwood, promising to leave no stone unturned. They reviewed every detail, re-interviewed witnesses, and used advanced forensic techniques. But even their collective power couldn't crack the impenetrable wall of silence surrounding the disappearance. For Sarah, Lily's mother, hope was a daily battle, fueled by the memory of her daughter's infectious giggle. Siblings, once playmates, now wrestled with confusion, guilt, and a deep sense of loneliness. Little Emma, Lily's younger sister, would often set an extra plate at dinner, whispering that Lily might come home. The sensational headlines that had once dominated national news gave way to newer, fresher tragedies. The news vans packed up, the reporters moved on, and the daily updates about the Havenwood missing children slowly disappeared from the airwaves. For the families, this fading attention felt like a second disappearance, a feeling of being abandoned by the very world that had once promised to help. It was as if their pain, their relentless search, no longer mattered to anyone outside their small, grieving town. The feeling of being forgotten, of their children's story becoming just another cold case file, was almost as agonizing as the initial loss. But still, in the quiet corners of Havenwood, the hope, however dim, persisted. waiting for a day when the world might remember again. Friends who had shared secrets and dreams with the missing children found themselves navigating a world that felt suddenly empty and dangerous. They struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering why they were spared. Teachers like Mrs. Davison carried an immense burden of responsibility and sorrow. Every new school year, as fresh faces filled the classrooms, she would look at them, her mind drifting to the children who never grew up, a silent ache in her soul. The trauma seeped into every corner of their lives, leaving scars that might never fully heal. She joined support groups, not just for comfort, but to strategize, to keep pushing. Memorials and remembrance events became annual rituals, somber gatherings where candles flickered and names were read aloud. A small park in the town square was dedicated to the Havenwood 14, with a tree planted for each child, their names etched onto individual plaques. These events were a bittersweet comfort, a chance for the community to come together in their grief, to ensure that the children were not forgotten. Pictures of their smiling faces were displayed, bringing tears to many eyes, a poignant reminder of the vibrant lives that were tragically cut short. Each year, the turnout might dwindle slightly, but for the families, these were sacred moments. A way to keep their children's memories alive, to cling to the hope that one day they would have answers. Michael, Alex's father, became a tireless advocate, organizing rallies, printing new flyers, and speaking to anyone who would listen. They created foundations, hired private investigators, and lobbied politicians. Their relentless efforts a testament to a love that transcended time and absence. They knew the world might forget, but they never could. Their determination was a powerful, heartbreaking force. A promise to their vanished children that they would never stop searching, never stop fighting for answers. The case was widely publicized, appearing on national news programs, leading to countless tips and leads, but each one proved to be a dead end. Despite the immense effort, the extensive resources, and the unwavering dedication of countless professionals, there was no breakthrough. The 14 missing children of Havenwood remained just that, missing, leaving behind a town haunted by a mystery that seemed destined to remain unsolved. Sarah, Lily's mother, found herself staring at her daughter's empty bed for hours. The scent of strawberry shampoo still lingering faintly on the pillow. The town, once so vibrant and full of small-town charm, was now draped in a heavy cloak of collective grief. Laughter became a rare sound, replaced by hushed whispers and solemn nods. The local diner, once a bustling hub, saw fewer smiling faces. The Friday night football games, a community tradition, felt hollow, missing the cheers of parents whose children were now gone. Every empty swing set in the park, every unused bicycle leaning against a garage, served as a stark, painful reminder of what had been lost. Havenwood wasn't just a place anymore. It was a town united by a shared sorrow. A silent understanding of unimaginable loss that settled deep into the bones of its residents. Michael, Alex's father, spent his days poring over maps of the nature reserve, convinced he would find the one spot the searchers had missed. Siblings struggled to understand why their brothers and sisters didn't come home, their innocent questions piercing the hearts of their grieving parents. The entire community of Havenwood was cloaked in a pervasive sadness. Local businesses suffered, schools felt empty, and even the simple act of a child's laughter in the park felt like a betrayal of the lost ones. Hope was a fragile thing, constantly battling against the crushing weight of despair. Others feared a vicious animal attack, though no large predators were known to inhabit the area. But the most terrifying and persistent theory was abduction. The idea that someone had deliberately taken these innocent lives, leaving no sign, sent shivers down everyone's spine. Each new theory, no matter how remote, offered a brief flicker of hope that soon turned to ash, leaving the families in an even darker place. The constant speculation only amplified their pain, making it impossible to grieve or move forward. It was as if the 14 children had simply dissolved into thin air. Despite endless interviews, no one came forward with any credible sightings or information. The bus, the only piece of physical evidence, offered no real clues either. No signs of a struggle, no fingerprints that didn't belong. This complete lack of evidence was perhaps the most agonizing part, fueling the despair and deepening the mystery. How could so many children vanish without a single trace? The investigators, usually so confident, now looked bewildered, their faces etched with frustration and a growing sense of helplessness. With no answers, various theories began to emerge, each one adding to the town's torment. The emotional toll on the families was immense, a gaping wound that refused to heal. As the case grew colder, state and federal agencies stepped in, bringing their resources and expertise. The disappearance of the 14 children cast a long, dark shadow over Havenwood. Yet amidst the pervasive sadness, a fragile, enduring hope flickered within the hearts of the families. They simply refused to give up. The psychological impact on those left behind was profound and heartbreaking. Over the years, Havenwood tried to remember, to honor. As time stretched on, the initial frenzy of media attention began to fade. Life in Havenwood had settled into a grim routine, a quiet acceptance of unresolved pain. But then, 18 long years after the children vanished, the silence was shattered once more. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, eerily similar to that fateful day when a group of college hikers, exploring a rarely visited, overgrown section of the Whispering Pines Nature Reserve, stumbled upon something deeply unsettling. Hidden beneath years of tangled undergrowth and fallen leaves, they saw glimpses of what looked like faded, sun-bleached fabric. It ripped open old wounds that had barely begun to scab over, bringing back the raw, piercing grief of that first terrible day. Every single twig, every piece of decayed material was carefully cataloged and analyzed. Specialists in anthropology and forensics worked tirelessly to identify the remains, hoping to give names back to the faded uniforms and tiny shoes. They cross-referenced old missing persons reports with the forensic data, matching dental records and bone structures slowly, heartbreakingly, identifying the children one by one. They spoke to the original bus driver, who was now much older, asking if anything, however small, had seemed out of place. They re-interviewed Mrs. Davison, the teacher, who recounted the events of that day with fresh tears, her memory sharpened by the new discoveries. Old park rangers, local residents who lived near the reserve, even former students who were now adults. Everyone who could possibly shed light was questioned again. The hope was that after 18 years, guilt or a change in circumstances might compel someone to speak, or that a forgotten detail would finally surface, fitting perfectly into the puzzle. The location where the remains were found was crucial. It was far off the known hiking trails in an area so remote and dense that it explained why the initial searches had failed. This suggested the children had either wandered incredibly far or had been led there. The condition of their belongings, particularly the lack of any signs of struggle or forced removal, started to paint a different, more puzzling picture than the abduction theories. A new narrative, unsettling in its simplicity, began to emerge. They used advanced techniques, some not even available back in 2007, to extract every possible clue from the challenging environment. Detectives re-interviewed original witnesses, their memories now 18 years older, hoping the new discovery might jog a forgotten detail. It became clear that the children had not been abducted in the traditional sense. Instead, a few of the more adventurous children, including Alex, had convinced the others to explore a secret path they believed led to an amazing hidden waterfall deep within the reserve. It was a common childhood impulse, a moment of innocent rebellion. However, this path was treacherous, not marked on any map, and quickly became disorienting. A sudden, unexpected heavy rainstorm, which had been quickly dismissed by weather reports that day, caused flash flooding and turned the hidden path into a death trap. The children, disoriented and caught in the sudden deluge, had been swept into a ravine, their small bodies and belongings carried far off course, buried by mudslides and debris. They hadn't been taken. They had been tragically lost to the unforgiving wilderness, an accidental, heartbreaking disaster of nature. It was a meticulous, emotional, and intensely focused effort, driven by the immense weight of the tragedy and the unwavering hope that this time, the truth, no matter how difficult, would finally emerge from the shadows of Whispering Pines. Sarah, Lily's mother, felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of overwhelming, trembling hope she hadn't dared to feel in years. Michael, Alex's father, felt a knot tighten in his stomach.
Ow!
His constant search for answers might finally be coming to an end, but at what cost? There was the agony of knowing, truly knowing that their children were gone, but also a fierce, almost desperate need for the truth, for closure. After 18 years of agonizing uncertainty, this breakthrough, however painful, was the first concrete step towards understanding what truly happened that day. As they cautiously dug around it, a wave of unease washed over them. It was clearly man-made, and it felt very, very old. Their casual hike had just turned into a discovery of immense, frightening significance. Forensic scientists worked tirelessly in their labs, their faces grimly determined as they analyzed the smallest fragments of cloth, soil, and bone. They used DNA technology, far more advanced than what was available in 2007, hoping to identify each child. The fragile, almost ghostly outlines of backpacks and lunchboxes were carefully reconstructed. Every tiny detail, from the specific type of pollen clinging to the fabric to the unique decomposition patterns in the soil, was scrutinized. This wasn't just science. It was a desperate, empathetic quest to give names back to the anonymous fragments, to piece together the final moments of these lost children with unwavering precision. At first there was only confusion. What were these strange, almost mummified remains doing out here, in such a remote part of the reserve? Local police, who had long ago filed the Havenwood case as cold, found themselves thrust back into a whirlwind of activity. The area was immediately sealed off, and forensic teams descended upon the site, their movements careful and somber. Soon national news networks, remembering the infamous 2007 disappearance, began broadcasting from Havenwood once more. The sleepy town was suddenly flooded with cameras and reporters, all eager to cover this stunning new development. The cold case, once a painful whisper, was now loudly and dramatically reopened, pulling the entire nation back into the mystery of the 14 vanished children. As they uncovered more, their hearts began to pound with a sickening realization. It wasn't just fabric. It was a small, torn piece of a yellow school uniform, still bearing a faded elementary school emblem. Then, a tiny, muddy shoe. And nearby, what looked like the remnants of a child's backpack, its contents long decayed. The hikers, who had started their day with laughter and light chatter, were now frozen in shock and horror. The impossible had happened. After nearly 2 decades, the Whispering Pines had finally given up a secret, a chilling and heartbreaking answer to the question that had tormented Havenwood for so long. The news spread like wildfire, reigniting a blaze of attention that had long since died down. For the families of the missing children, the discovery was a devastating, yet oddly compelling moment. With the site now a meticulously controlled forensic scene, investigators began their painstaking work. With the recovered remains and artifacts, the investigative teams launched into a detailed and painstaking examination of every single piece of evidence. As the lab results started coming in, investigators began the incredibly difficult task of connecting these new findings to the events of that long-ago day. Detectives revisited old files and began new rounds of interviews, focusing on anyone who had been near the reserve that day or had known the children particularly well. Slowly, agonizingly, the truth began to piece itself together, not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, devastating revelations. The emotional climax arrived when the lead detective, his voice heavy with sorrow, shared the full, devastating findings with the assembled families. There were no villains, no abductors to hate, just the cruel indifference of nature. For parents like Sarah, Lily's mother, the endless, agonizing questions finally stopped. The tears she cried were no longer just from the terror of not knowing, but from a profound grief mixed with a quiet acceptance. All across the country, especially in areas with large natural parks, safety rules for school trips were seriously looked at and made much stronger. More focus was put on checking for dangers, talking clearly with parents, and having more adults watch the children. Any hidden or dangerous paths in nature parks were either clearly marked with warnings or completely blocked off. It's a story that began with innocent excitement and plunged into nearly 2 decades of agonizing mystery. We've journeyed through the frantic search, the crushing weight of unanswered questions, and the enduring pain that settled over a community. Finally, we've witnessed the shocking revelation that, after 18 long years, brought a painful but essential truth to light. Emergency ways to communicate during trips were made better, so if anything went wrong, help could arrive much faster. It speaks volumes about the unwavering strength of the human spirit, the relentless hope of parents. the tireless dedication of investigators, and a community's enduring resilience. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful and often untold stories to light. While the answers were heartbreaking, they brought a form of peace, allowing Havenwood to finally begin its true healing process, forever changed, but forever remembering. The sad story of the Havenwood 14 became a serious example, a strong reminder of the unexpected dangers that can hide in even the most beautiful natural places, forcing changes that would protect countless other children in the future. Knowing what truly happened, even that it was a cruel twist of nature, allowed them to finally start the difficult process of mourning. The park named after them remained a special, sacred place, its trees growing taller each year, symbolizing their lasting presence. It reminds us that sometimes there are no bad guys, only tragic accidents that leave a lasting mark. Yet, in the midst of this deep sorrow, there is also a powerful testament to the enduring strength of hope and the tireless search for truth. For 18 long years, these families held on to a small spark of hope, driving an unstoppable quest for answers. When the truth finally came to light, it brought a different kind of hope, the hope for closure, for healing, and for a future where such a terrible event might be prevented. It's a reminder that even in the darkest mysteries, human spirit's need for understanding and closure can light up the path forward, no matter how long or painful the journey. On the anniversary of their disappearance, candles would still be lit, and their names read aloud, not just by their families, but by new generations who learned their story. Their faces, once seen on missing posters, now lived on in the hearts of the community, symbols of lost innocence and a shared, deep sorrow. They were remembered not just as victims, but as the children who forever changed Havenwood, pushing it to become a safer, more careful place for everyone. The community of Havenwood, too, felt a collective sigh of sorrowful relief. They gathered, not in frantic search parties, but in hushed vigils, their shared pain now a bond of deeper understanding. The terrifying mystery that had haunted them for 18 years was finally answered, bringing a painful but much-needed clarity. The initial reaction was a mix of profound grief, utter shock, and an unexpected, almost bewildering sense of relief. For some families, knowing the truth brought enough closure to finally lay their children to rest, both physically and emotionally. They could now visit a gravesite, a real place to grieve. Yet, for others, the wound might never truly close. The what-ifs shifted, from what if they were kidnapped, to what if they hadn't chosen that path. The grief changed, but it never fully disappeared. Havenwood as a town did heal in many ways, but it always carried its scars. Laughter returned to the streets, but there was always a quiet understanding, a deeper appreciation for how fragile life is. It's settled into every corner of the community. Sarah collapsed into her husband's arms, her body racked with sobs, not of new loss, but of the release of 18 years of agonizing uncertainty. Michael, his face pale, closed his eyes, the image of his adventurous son, Alex, exploring a hidden path, now taking on a tragic new meaning. The truth was far more ordinary, yet infinitely more heartbreaking than any dark theory they had ever imagined. It wasn't the dramatic resolution they might have expected from a mystery, but a stark, painful reminder of life's fragility and the crushing power of unforeseen tragedy. This unexpected truth brought a different kind of closure, a raw, aching peace that finally allowed Havenwood to truly begin, its long process of mourning. The truth about the Havenwood 14, though incredibly painful, brought a strange, heavy sense of peace to the families and the entire community. The long-term consequences of such a deep tragedy are impossible to fully measure, and the journey of healing for Havenwood was, and still is, a very slow and uneven path. From this immense sorrow, important lessons were learned, changing how places handled child safety. Even as years passed and the truth came out, the memory of the 14 vanished children never truly faded in Havenwood. The story of the Havenwood 14 is a heartfelt reflection on how fragile life truly is, how quickly innocent moments can turn into unbearable sadness, how suddenly joy can be replaced by profound grief. And so, the haunting tale of the 14 vanished children of Havenwood Elementary comes to a close. This narrative reminds us of the profound fragility of life and how unexpected tragedy can strike, even in the most serene settings. If this story touched you, or if you found yourself captivated by the twists and turns of this cold case, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell.